Enjoy with your headphones for a better listening experience.
Please watch till the end of the video to have the most scariest part of the story.
Near-to-death experience. I had an allergic reaction to medication in a hospital, which caused a seizure that closed my windpipe. This happened late at night in a rural hospital, and some protocols were not followed, so it took the nursing staff a few minutes to respond to what was happening. Luckily, I survived, and left this experience with a much unique perspective on life. Here is an account of my experience. About 20 minutes after I took the medication, and said goodnight to the nurse, things were okay. Then I started to feel something was wrong. I was conscious for the first few minutes of the seizure. However, my breathing slowly became shallower, and turned to alarm as it became harder to swallow, and then panic when I could not breathe or cry out. I lost control, and a seizure followed. However, I was conscious through this moment. I realized I was suffocating to death. I tried to cry out, but the seizure overwhelmed me. Darkness crept on the sides of my vision, then the world slowly lost color saturation. Dying is the most uncomfortable feeling you will ever experience. The next part is hard to explain, although I have explained it to close family members before like this. It is as if I was not for an eternity, then I was. Like blacking out, or going under anesthesia, you simply are turned off, then you are awake. Something like awake. After an eternity passed, there was a light. Not a light at the end of the tunnel, cliché. This was more like an infinite seam of light, like one of these lines in this picture, going from infinity up and down, and I was floating in space moving amazingly fast towards it. Then, I was somewhere familiar. I grew up in a rural mountainous area with a lot of farm fields and nearby ski resorts, and there is one resort that my parents would take us when I was younger every summer. The resorts have summer events when it's not ski season, that is at the top of a winding road through beautiful golden forests. I got the sense this road, or something like it, where I was. In front of me, there was a hay cart to my left, and some bales of hay to my right. Behind the hay cart was a man, and behind him was a beautiful tree. Now before you go say, Jesus, let me be clear, at the moment I wasn't even thinking that, I wasn't even thinking at all, just experiencing, if that makes sense, nor did he resemble anything at all like how Jesus probably ought to look like, not Middle Eastern. This man had long hair, tied back, and wore a simple linen shirt. It reminded me in retrospect of pirate shirts. Your standard hippie. He seems oddly familiar in retrospect, like someone I know I have met, but I cannot place how I know them. I do not think it was Jesus, but part of me feels like it did not really matter whatever or whoever it was, this entity was a friend. I got the sense the hay meant something. Every straw of hay in the hay bales meant something. There's a lot of work to do, he said without saying, in a familiar voice that I cannot place, and gestured to the hay. Then again, somehow without saying anything, I was presented with a choice: stay and help this friend load up hay on the hay cart and head up the mountain or leave. I explained without words I had to take care of my family, my mother, not doing well at the time, and I could not stay. Without saying anything, just an expression of sadness and understanding, the man raised his hand and his fingers towards me. Warmth flushed over my face, then like a whole movie in reverse, the mountain road fell away, the seam of light, the darkness, then there was warmth, which turned out to be my own blood. I was coughing all over my face, and right at a frantic doctor holding a tube. They explained to me later they gave me something like an EpiPen for the allergic reaction. So, that is what happened. I was not a religious person my whole life. I am still not. I was a long-time agnostic atheist, in the same school of thought as Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris. This experience planted a seed, that over time made I decided to be an agnostic theist. I do not know what I experienced. I do not like to recall what I experienced too much, because every time you remember something that something changes. Every straw of hay in that hay bale, I think represented some transgression. You have a weight to deal with when it is over, and it seemed like it was being presented to me in a way I could understand. Maybe if you grew up near the ocean, it would be shown to you as a distance to swim, or a lot of fish to bring back to shore. I grew up near farm fields, so this experience made sense to me. I am writing this now because I want to put a record somewhere of what happened and away from the earth of my mind, where it grew into a belief that there is an agent of our existence that is beyond our understanding. Chalk it up to a DMT trip, my brain going haywire as it lost oxygen, or whatever suits your fancy. The experience was real to me, and it made me humble before the universe and filled with an enormous sense of peace that your heaven and hay waits beyond somewhere. I was an atheist too, also very much a skeptic, believing the theory that DMT produced in the brain at death explained NDEs. I started meditating after several traumatic years of suffering. Not knowing anything at all about meditation, when I started to feel energy move through my body, and then started to feel a familiarity that I still cannot explain, I thought at first, I was dying. Since then, things have continued to progress. I have experienced floating out of my body, being able to turn around and see myself lying in bed, go outside and see things that I could verify when I got up. I do not have the same luxury of deniability that I had before these experiences. It sounds like you are in a similar boat. If you ever need anyone to talk to, especially if your dreams have changed, please PM me. It is a lonely road, although it seems we are not in fact alone. July of 2013. I was having a rough night dealing with the fact that my grandmother had a scan done for something, but they caught that there is a strong likelihood of cancer returning that she had beaten a few years prior. They said that they had good reason to believe her lungs were littered with tumors and she was getting that confirmed the next morning with a follow-up. I was feeling so shitty about that, so I decided that I would try to pray to God for the first time. I sat on my couch and pleaded in my head before bed, promised God that I would be eternally grateful, etc. I went to lay down in bed and I started feeling a buzzing sensation at the base of my spine. It was weird but felt relaxing at the same time. All of a sudden this buzzing started to travel up my spine and my body felt like it was simply taken over by something else. Like a wave of powerful energy that just took my whole body. It traveled all the way up to my head and I was paralyzed with this incredible feeling I have never felt before. I could feel my mouth wide open, and my entire body was vibrating. I can remember hearing and feeling the bed shaking. I was vibrating so much. My girlfriend, now wife, was sleeping next to me, and I am blown away that she did not wake up. When it went to my head, I heard a pop in my head and all of a sudden these visions came flooding into my head. Not any physical type of visions, but more so powerful colors that would take forms and shift in diverse ways. I had an amazing sense of understanding and peace. Like I tapped some knowledge that I have never had before. I was being fed something from somewhere and it is extremely hard to explain. I then saw a large eye encompassed by a triangle. That so-called evil symbol of the Illuminati. I was aware of the conspiracy theories surrounding that, but I can say that I felt nothing but pure love, so I did not concern myself in that. I felt like I was floating, but anyways I will carry on with the story. The following day, feel free to skip this paragraph, just some sprinkles to help tell the whole story but not overly important. I woke up and I had this amazing clarity that I have never had in my life. No bags under my eyes, no joint pains, and everything just seemed perfect. I drove to work, and typically in rush hour I must dodge 5 cars from hitting me on my way downtown. The cars in the middle lane started changing lanes as I came up behind them. I did not hit one single red light. When I typically struggle with my keys at work, I grabbed the exact key from my pocket and pulled it out flawlessly. When I would walk around a corner at work, I knew who was going to be there. Sure enough, they would be walking by. I could feel people and they could feel me. Whenever I saw someone that day I could feel, and see, their energy change from wherever it was to an amazing cheerful outlook. I could also physically see auras, all of a sudden. Not saying I want a nice person, but my presence was changing their attitude drastically before I even said a word. The average Joe that would grunt, "Good morning," with a frown would light up like a light bulb. Every one of them. The day conducted with all sorts of good news, and everything I touched went flawless to a point of being too good to be true. That evening, I received a phone call from my dad. Nan's results came back negative. They could not explain it, but they could not find the spots on her lungs. I just remember smiling and shedding a tear and saying, "Thank you God," after I got off the phone. That night I had 100 questions. I needed to talk to this power. I demanded to know if Christianity is real. Is this a Christian God? Is this Jesus? So many questions. I fell asleep that night and woke up in the dead of night, wide awake. I looked at the clock and it was 3:33 a.m. Not a big deal. The next day went like the previous. Life was good. I started Googling my experiences, and that is when I found out about the third eye, Kundalini, chakras, etc. Blew my mind that someone like me was going through Eastern religious experience, but I digress. It led me to synchronicity where 333 was the number of Jesus. That night I went to bed and said, "If this is the work of Jesus, please wake me up at 3:33 again." Sure enough, I woke up wide awake and looked at my phone. 3:33, I was blown away. Next day was great, and I did the same thing at night. I explained that I am the world's biggest skeptic and needed one more night of proof. Well, this time I slept through the night and my alarm failed to go off. I took that as a point of frustration and went about my day, which kept going like the two previous. I felt like I had control over everything that was happening in those days. If I felt it, it would happen. Like that theory that you can manipulate the universe to give you what you want. It was like that, but extraordinarily strong. I never took it to a level of greed, but every small ticket thing was falling my way to a 100% success rate. I could close my eyes anywhere and start seeing those colors actively working within seconds, and energy entering my body. Many times, seeing that all-seeing eye I mentioned earlier. A few months go by, and life is great. The only downfall is that my wife is being harassed by a recently fired coworker who had a bit of a thing for her. He was a creepy guy and started calling her phone every night and breathing into the phone. I finally answered the phone after days of this and I fed into him. I said some choice words and for the first time he was the one who hung up. I woke up in the morning to drive my girlfriend to work but had a smashed window on my car. That day she creeped his Facebook and he had posted, "I did something bad with a ball-peen hammer tonight." This guy was a real weirdo, and not that bright because that confirmed our strong suspicion that he was behind all the phone calls and the window. Why is this important? I was 23 at the time of all this and had a history of taking matter into my own hands. I was a good person but would never shy away from vigilantism when it was earned. The following morning, I was on my balcony having a coffee and my morning cigarette during a big snowfall. I decided I should consult with the higher power gifting me all these experiences before I executed my plan, as I considered myself a different person than I was prior to July. Once I finished my silent prayer, I looked to my left and carved into the freshly fallen snow on the 4-inch rail topper are the perfect letters, N-O. This was freshly fallen snow that is still coming down as I am reading it, and my girlfriend was just getting out of bed. I could see large snowflakes landing on top of it and slowly cover it. I was blown away because this was a very deliberate physical sign which was not ever that apparent. I missed many minor stories over the span of that time, but realized I was rambling a bit. Let me assure you that I have always been a very grounded person and do not have any history of mental health issues of anything like that. All of these powers seem to have faded over the next year or so, however life has treated me beyond fair since then. I have been lucky my entire life since then and have a life that I never pictured I could have had when I was younger. I do not have a single thing to complain about, and I left that experience with a faith I otherwise never would have found. I know you cannot rule out scientific reasonings for some of these things, but again you would have to have this happen for months the way I did to fully believe it. I hope you read all this, because it took me a long time to type it out on my phone. I gobbled up every word. You know why? Because I had a remarkably similar experience that involved a light coming through the crown of my head and down my spine. It felt blissful beyond anything I have ever experienced, and it was accompanied by many profound visions that are alive and vibrant years afterward. Afterward, I realized I had been upgraded. Everything is more vivid, and I can see light coming from living things and feel energies. I see small lights like a tiny flashlight coming from flowers. I too had events preceding that led up to it. And during this phase, people were somehow magnetized to me. I got invited unexpected to be a guest speaker at a large diversity event with zero experience or qualifications. Everything was perfect and blissful. I was so bliss-filled that it was really a struggle to work, and I often wonder what would have happened if I had quit. I must share this too. During this phase, I was walking my dogs on a nature trail and putting my mind into nature mind of trust that I learned in a book. A herd of 8 deer ran across a field and galloped up to me. They were about 20 feet away, staring at me and stomping and snorting. It was clear they were connected to my energy. After about 45 seconds they ran off. Now that animals operate in the true God realm, and we can tap in. If science were able to capture this, I personally am quite certain it is some natural maturing process involving consciousness. I bought hundreds of books looking for others who had this powerful experience, and the closest thing I found was a term someone made up, spiritually transformative experience. Kundalini is also related. When I was 18 or 19, my friend always used to talk to me about meditation and astral projection. Never believed him really, but I tried to do it all the time and got good at meditating, over months. I remember sitting down one night watching TV, I was calm and still, and I suddenly felt like I was being pulled out of my body. The sensation was coming from my head and chest, and I was being pulled out towards the right. I have never really told anyone about this. I stopped meditating shortly thereafter. I still consider myself an agnostic atheist. Obviously, I want there to be something beyond this life, but I do not think there is. When did you feel it changed for you? Was there a particular event that made you change your thinking? Have you experienced the sensation of being pulled out of your body before? I am a medical doctor. The reason I chose medicine is because I had a NDE as a 5-year-old child. I went to a beautiful garden, and I met a familiar person too. My experience was different from yours, in that my separation from my body was extremely easy. I could suddenly breathe freely, something I struggled with due to the pneumonia. I understand what you say about the hay. I too felt that everything and everyone were connected somehow, everything had meaning. I am glad you shared your story. This is what I think, too. And sometimes it makes me sad because the extension of this thinking is realizing that we are not our personalities, and we shed those when we die, when we individual droplets rejoin the ocean. It makes me think that I will not care about my parents, my family, my friends, all the people and things I have ever loved. That goes away, as we go back to the one, and it makes me sad. And then I think to myself, the feelings of embracing, reconnecting with loved ones, that longing is a human longing. And we will lose that too. We will just go back to being everyone, and there will be no single one person to have those wishes and desires. But other times, I feel like this is not it. There is life after death, there are more things to do, lessons to learn as the individual souls that we are. We reincarnate. But I often cannot tell if this is all just dreaming on my part, since my human mind naturally does not like the idea of losing what makes me. And then I think, that is just the grand illusion, there is no me, we are all just fingers on the same hand, drops of water from the same ocean. Really just rambling at this point. I was angry about this separation happening at death for years, being sucked up, just my experience uses. Like I was a puppet of something bigger and not helping me down here with the terrifying thought of my personality merging into the one. Many years later I got hit by, I can only explain it as a love bomb. The realization that it is all about love, lack of love for most here. But love is the secret and all it is about. And now given the choice, if someone said would you give away everything to be part of that love, suddenly it was deeply emotional and not ego-mental and I would say yes. It makes me think that all we are, is this divine love at the end of the day. I had a very life-changing and eye-opening dream. It changed me and my life. It was not just a dream, it was real. Or I really died in my sleep and came back, and it was a NDE LOL. I believe there might be alternate or parallel universes, or it is just heaven, like we are living out a different life here, but we are also elsewhere doing something else in spirit. I went to this place, and I saw the behind scenes of what was happening in this physical life. It looks like one thing here but there it shows other things. Events happened later Earth that confirmed my experience. But time here and there is quite different, too. Anyway, anyone I have told think it was just a dream, but it was not just a dream. Everything changed for me that day in my mind and beliefs. It has been building and growing after that. How can one explain these things in logic and language when it's unexplainable by those mechanisms? I do not dismiss your dream as just a dream. Dreams are very reasonably theorized to be endogenous DMT in low doses while we sleep. All these vehicles, meditation, psychedelics, fasting, dreams, it does not matter. It bypasses the brain's reducing valve on reality at large, beyond the veil of our senses. What is out there, and we can drop the veil of illusion in many ways to see past it. That is what your dream did. Dreams are one of the strangest experiences of life. I think that the just a dream dismissal that our collective culture has accepted is a comfortable way of dealing with the unknown. We decided that since we can't explain them we should relegate them to cognitive noise, or at best, subconscious plays that our mind entertains to better understand events, and bear in mind that I am a professor of psychology, and study consciousness academically when I say that we largely do not understand dreams beyond neurochemistry and brain wave patterns. The how and the why still escape us. I think it does them a real disservice. Look at the placebo effect, as well. We take it for granted that simply thinking the body is getting better through medicine, that it physically does. Does that not seem more profound to you, or begging us to understand the power of the mind, more than just, oh, well, you know that happens but it's no big deal? My NDE was darkness and story of the earth needing to be repopulated. For me I had oxygen, it was more of a coma-type brain condition, and it lasted for days. The story/experience felt long but I too felt like I had an option. I mentally chose that it was okay to go, but the medications and work the doctors were doing pulled me back. I am happy to be back. This event was 15 years ago, so a lot of good in my life since then. The one thing it gave me was it 100% dissolved any fear of death. I just know that you continue somehow. When my mom was dying last year, they had her so drugged up on elephant-grade painkillers she was not lucid for the last 3 or 4 days. We sat by her bed those last days and just talked like she was there and a part of the conversation, assuming some part of her was still there to listen. So, we wanted her to know how much of an amazing person she was. Right at the end, when her breathing was getting increasingly shallow, her eyes opened for the first time in days, and they were not foggy eyes, they were bright and clear and saw us there and everything. All 3 of us, my sister and my dad and I, cried out in amazement, "We see you, we see you." We cried, and she was there with us. Those last moment of her life her eyes were wide open, and she spent them with us. I often think about those last moments and the clarity that she found in them. Where did it come from? It has had a lasting impact on me. The experience drew my attention to so many things I could be trying to take more responsibility for, just so much I could do to try to live a better life. I am still working on most of it honestly. The differing ways people encounter this, hey, is so interesting to me as well. Before the vivid dream experiences I had involving some of these familiar metaphors for connection and redemption, I was not dying or on DMT. I was just really stressed out and had smoked a heavy amount of weed for my tolerance level at the time. At the time I would have told you that the stress made me feel like I was dying, but looking back with current knowledge, it was mostly emotional exhaustion. Astral stream. So, the astral stream is akin to something like the mother tree in Avatar, except it is a universal scale. So, this astral stream is the source of our universe. Our intelligence. Our power. The source of this realm, if you will. And it flows with reincarnation. Now this goes deep outside of that and goes into topics involving everything from life and death to the flat earth idea, except it is not flat earth like the meme. It is flat realm. Flat plane. We can take that as well if you like. Some interesting videos and people letting that info slip. But anyways, the stream flows through it all. Through the center. And when we die, it is the white light that is always referenced in media and in stories about death. There is a trick here though. When some people die and then come back, they say they saw crazy things. Saw Jesus type deal. Now faith is faith, but the reality is sometimes when people die, they see exactly what they have expected to see. Our perception continues the reality even if we're about to die by creating the idea we have always had. Now for this death, people have not actually died yet. They have just come extremely close to it, and this is the result. The other side of the experience is for those that truly die and then, miraculously, come back. These are when you hear the stories of the white light and all of that. Now the white light, the astral stream, is the source. It is what flows through our dome, flat plane theory, remember this, and what we are born out of. So, when we die, they're first the initial choice. Now movies like Poltergeist, written by a man with much more knowledge than anyone would like to admit, Stephen King, cleverly have the saying "do not go into the light." That is not a joke or a trope. It is real. The choice is, do you want to be recycled? Or do you want to experience the beyond? Being recycled is going into the light. Going into the stream. And then there is the second choice, continue in as you were, decide to come back, or be reincarnated as something new. This is when we see those familiar faces that we do not recognize because it is us, but in a different form. Midnight Gospel EP 5 Annihilation of Joy on Netflix is a polite conversation piece about this. The whole show is wonderful actually, and I recommend everyone watch it. But this episode is important. But we always have the choice of what to do. For anyone interested, choosing the void by not going into the light, is a viable option for anyone. It is scary but for a purpose that also touches on flat plane theory. But to keep it simple, it is how we escape this realm. This plane that we are on. It is how we escape the cycle. The astral stream connects it all. And goes beyond much more than this. But for the context of Op's post, this is the information relative. I do not have a nude, but just to comment on what Op said about suffocating, I had an allergic reaction to compazine and the muscles that my lungs used to breathe stopped working. It was horrible. I was frantically trying to get oxygen into my lungs, and I just could not. I ended up collapsing and being rushed to the hospital. Luckily, the reaction only lasted a few minutes, but I was convinced I was going to die. It was also a tough time in my life as I was fighting heroin addiction. And to top it off, it happened at work, so everyone just assumed it was me being me. This was years ago, and I am sober now, but this was one of the worst experiences of my life. Thank you for your humbling story. At one point you have faith and trust so strong that it is not a sense of doubt or what if. You just know there is a place we go afterwards. A process. Not just nothing. Even if others try to refute it. It is not up for debate. It does not matter what XYZ said from their experience with NDE. Or chemicals. We all go back to our Maker. And it is the only thing that can give my being peace. Because it will be okay. In the end. It will be okay. Remain open, remain humble and cry out with sincerity. You will not be ignored so long as you ask. But many do not lose their lives, and even if they spent most of it this way, they are still shown mercy right near the end when they cry out with sincerity. It is beautiful. It is humbling. And it makes me feel so vulnerable. I cannot explain it. But I am glad you saw what you did. It is a blessing. And you just took a pile of the hay out of the wagon by sharing this, didn't you? Also, people easily fall into idolatry. They look at a statue or painting and worship it, when it is nothing. It is not Jesus, it is not what he looks like, it is an artist's interpretation on how he thinks Jesus looked like, but he himself would never know as he never laid his eyes on the King of Kings. I have seen people worship and bow down to crosses and images of Jesus, and the deception is subtle. Because they worship wood, ink, and a twisted view of how they view the Son of God, because they see these pictures, statues, and communities behaving and acting so passionately around them when they come across these things, that they pray to a picture, a statue, an idol. People who glorify the cross, who see it and begin to pray at it, forget what happened to God's Son was a horrendous and brutal beating that the cross was known to have pinned him on. It is not worthy of worship nor thought or respect. True faith comes from praying and speaking quietly, in a place you are alone, or a place you may have many gathered. But it comes from your heart. Because after all the people leave, that bond never will. And it can never be broken, it can never cease. No entity or evil demonic force can come between it no matter how hard they would try. It is absolute. This bond is held and shared with God. A lot of people do not care or dwell on this. They want proof, material manifestations. They ask for signs yet gain nothing from having them done to them anyway. When you just humbly pray to God and His Son, Jesus, and honestly ask God and Jesus to come into your life, you have opened the door. It may take time, your entire life, but I know without doubt that you will begin to understand what these words mean. People will not like you, make fun of you, or act like you are foolish and an outdated hypocrite. They will laugh at you when you try to talk about God but spend hours debating useless things that give no benefit to their soul. They are restless. They hold many burdens. If only they listen once to this and pray. Because once you can just feel this bond, it helps you overcome your lows, even when wrong and violence is done to you. That you feel alone, you hear only silence in your cries. When you talk to God knowing He hears you regardless in your head, out of whispers, or with feelings, God knows. This does not mean you will get what you want or desire. From my experience you will suffer a lot for these desires. But only to show you the folly of the way you viewed it in the first place. I hope anyone who read this and has an urge nudging them to pray listen and do with sincerity. That you may honor these words and, in a way, me, so that I at least was able to do a tiny bit of God's will and not be useless as an antisocial and anxious person. If you read all this to the bottom, I know you did, because you were meant to see this. So here it is. For you, because regardless how you came here and found yourself at this moment, alas, you were shown this because you are blessed. This was great for me to hear, and it is weird how I stumbled across this. I have been suffering heavily from depression and anxiety. I was really struggling with self-doubt, and I just decided to sit quietly and pray. It opened my mind to the rationalization that there are things I simply cannot understand here. I would have to leave my physical body and exist in another place to begin to understand the unknown. I would have to rationalize 3 states of being, and since we can only experience 2 states of being in our physical bodies, I simply cannot begin to rationalize this. My understanding of this was so clear to me that it forced me to start living a better life here and now. I am having breakthroughs and self-realizations about why I suffer from anxiety and depression, and I feel much better now. I am a Christian but pretty dedicated to naturalism and materialism in almost any situation. My education is science, and my career is decades-long in research and development and technology development. In the past I would have dismissed your story as having a natural explanation. Recently I got into a podcast called Cultish, where they either discuss cults or things that have a cultish feel to them like New Age or UFOs etc. Anyway, they interviewed a guy named Stephen Bondars who is a former New Age type. He was some sort of a leader in that field. He made tons of money selling books and went on speaking series. He said by the time he was 22 he owned a 4,000 square foot house in Los Angeles free and clear. A house that size in Los Angeles would have to be many millions of dollars. He had no incentive for leaving the movement except true conviction. He became a Christian and is now a voice against New Age practices, saying they are rehashed paganism. It is a remarkably interesting guy and I highly recommend you check out the several cultish episodes with him being interviewed. Anyway, I am not here to bad-mouth New Age or anything, just setting the stage. It is important because Bondars is noticeably clear that his experiences were real. He really had out-of-body experiences and astral projection. He said those experiences were more real than daily life because the experiences were not filtered through a 3-pound lump of gooey stardust called a brain. He said it was one of the things that made him dismissive of Christianity early on. He knew what he was experiencing, he knew it was real, and some Christian who has not experienced anything tells him with authority that it was just a hallucination. His thoughts were, if Christians can be wrong about that, then why trust them on anything? The question is, should we do those things, and the Bible clearly says no, not that prohibition applies to your situation obviously. But the Bible affirms they are real, just that they are dangerous. Anyway, you had a genuine experience. Thanks for sharing the story. The only conversions I ever see in after-death experiences are when the person goes to hell. They come back, repent, and follow Jesus. All the others simply felt peace and want to live a good life, which is not the way to get to where you were. It is interesting. It is like it is a different version of hell to keep you deceived, a facade. The elect is all saved in the end. The hell accounts of after-death experiences are terrifying. And these are also from agnostics, atheists, pagans who did not believe.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.